The last leg of our conversation, at least as of in respect of what we are discussing now, it has to do with COVID-19 expenditure, what we saw the finance minister deliver in Parliament, 18 billion cedis that we've got in our kitty, and what has exactly been spent. We've heard the Speaker of Parliament designate the Finance and Health Committees to come together and probe further. Joining the conversation, we will have Same Obeng, who joins the conversation. He is with the Parliamentary Network Africa. Thank you for joining the conversation, sir.
For having me.
Right. So, in respect of what we've seen in Parliament, let's start with whether this was even necessary. I've asked this question to a number of people. Was it even necessary for the finance minister to come and, go through these figures again in Parliament?
I'm not too sure what you meant by again.
Well, you know that he has made mention of the fact that, there's been a breakdown when it comes to, at least some breakdown when it comes to COVID-19 spending. This is not the first time. We've seen it in budgeting and all of that. But there was this call that he should come and give a breakdown. And now, even after the majority felt that he had, catered for all the angles, we also have to have this joint committee work. That's the angle I'm coming from.
Yes, the reason I asked about the again is to make the point that the institution of Parliament and parliamentarians are elected primarily to perform three functions: to represent us as citizens, to oversee the executive branch, and to make laws. Within the representative and oversight functions that they play, this exercise, in my opinion, is extremely important. In very challenging times, COVID hit, we're not prepared for it. Nobody was prepared for it. Emergency measures were taken, emergency funding were released. The country had to put itself in a shape where it could mobilize resources and spend because we're in dire times. Desperate times called for desperate measures. It is only appropriate that the people's representatives are, accounted to, so that in essence, it will be accounting to the people on what these desperate times that call for desperate measures had actually resulted in. And so for me, I did not see it as anything wrong. In fact, it remains within the rights of Parliament to have called the Minister for Finance to come and provide a statement on the floor of Parliament on how COVID funding was spent. And parliaments the world over will do similar things.
Were you impressed by what Ken Ofori-Atta, finance minister, gave us by way of information? There were some loopholes that were pointed to by the minority side, including, importantly, the COVID-19 Trust Fund and the point that there had been no accountability for how much we had raised from there.
I looked at the finance minister's presentation from a parliamentary practice and procedures perspective mainly. Of course, the accounting of it definitely would not be my area of strength. But obviously, I know that the finance minister and the finance ministry had to take some time to be able to put some of these bits and figures together. I can imagine the kind of hard work that had gone into putting it together to come and make a presentation to Parliament, because of course, Parliament needed to hear these things. My general overview is that, these were the broader areas, broader figures that were presented to Parliament. Obviously, finance minister couldn't have drilled into the nitty-gritties, the fine details. And for me, that is why I find the speaker's referral to the appropriate committee.
Right, I was just about to get to that. So you find it apt?
Well, I find it relevant for the purposes of considering this. Why do I say this? Some have argued that there is an auditor general who audits the accounts of the state and presents a report to Parliament. That is correct. In fact, the auditor general is an officer, the head of or the supreme audit institution, is an officer of the national legislator. So the auditor general is an officer of Parliament. He performs that particular function because as part of the power of the purse function that Parliament performs, they approve the money, you go out, you spend. you account for it. It is audited, a report is sent to Parliament, and Parliament probes the report and takes the appropriate measures that needed to be taken. So yes, that route exists. But of course, you don't talk about that kind of route when we are in a country where Auditor General's reports for particular years gets discussed in Parliament or at the parliamentary committee assigned for it several years after the spending has been done. COVID-19 was a special case. Special decisions were taken, and I do not see any reason why anybody should be fighting against special measures to ensure accountability.
All right, just to wrap the conversation briefly, let's focus a bit on NPP elections, Samuel Bing. The NPP has cleared some 48 people to vie. I mean, since we're still talking about the politics of things, to vie for different positions on the national platform. 3 people were disqualified, and they are supposed to meet Peter McMenu, who is leading that committee, to find out why exactly they were disqualified. I want your quick thinking on that, and also maybe you could feed into what former President Kufuor has been saying, that, look, I've not endorsed any aspirant yet. There's been information floating that he has endorsed one of the candidates. I don't want to get into the naming, but what is your quick take on these two, maybe in about a minute?
Well, of course, for every process that requires that decisions get taken on people, the right of appeal of the people who have decisions taken on them is very, very relevant. And so given an opportunity for people who have been disqualified to, appeal and to meet the rights authorities to have a conversation within the ambit of the rules and constitution governing their party is important. Of course, we have always known in this country also, on the second question, that big wigs endorsing candidates, definitely has an impact on the election fortunes of those candidates. We know that people of the caliber of President Kufuor have been in the game for a very long time, and they know the impact of these things. And so they definitely would speak when, in their opinion, they feel that information being thrown out there is not accurate. You cannot fault them for that.
But I know I put you on a time leash, but just indulge me a bit further. Would there be anything wrong with it if, looking at his position as a statesman, former president of the land, respected as he is, if he said, I am backing this person? Would it be wrong? And
No.
how do you feel that would impact the fortunes of the party going into election 2024, positively or negatively?
Well, I would not see that to be wrong. Of course, I will not pretend to be deep-necked into the dynamics of political party internal elections. And so maybe I may not understand things the way that members who are deep-necked will understand it. But for me, I feel that we are in the time in our country's socio-political governance history where one cannot sit on the fence. If you've got an opinion, if you've got a view on a particular matter, you put it out there. If you have a preference and you think somebody can do better than another person based on cogent reasoning, and you are in the person of the caliber of President Kufuor, who have toiled for 8 years to lead this country, and therefore would not want to see the country go down the drain because of bad leadership, I don't see that people like this will keep quiet and not have an opinion on a matter. But definitely these decisions or remarks definitely would have an impact on the fortunes of an election. I mean, many people revere former President Kufuor, and the things that he says or does not say definitely has a way of impacting what people do or do not do.
Samuel Bing, thank you so much for joining the conversation. He is with Parliamentary Network Africa. Let me now bring in Dr. Osai Kwapong, who is a CDD fellow. Dr. Kwapong, a very good morning to you, sir.
Good morning to you too.
Great. Let's start with your reflection on the entire process just a few days ago as we hauled, basically, Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta into Parliament to answer crucial questions that the minority had been, making a lot of point on, and it had to do with accountability when it comes to COVID-19 spending. What do you make of that exercise as you saw it?
So I agree with the sentiments expressed by Sami in terms of if you think of the role of Parliament in our governance setup, there's the representation piece, there's the lawmaking piece, and then there's the oversight and accountability piece. And so for me, Parliament was exercising its right within the realm of the oversight and accountability piece. You do have a situation, a very unique situation in which something that no one anticipated happened on a global, worldwide scale. It impacted Ghana. Government took measures to try and ward off some of the effects of COVID-19. It made some interventions into the economy to ensure that we insulated ourselves as much as we could against the ravaging effects of COVID-19. 2 years later, and I know that the minister has, in budget statements, made references to how much the government has spent on COVID-19 measures. But I think it is within the right of Parliament, as an oversight body of the executive, to also ask any further questions that they seek for clarification purposes. And so, for me, I think it was an important request of the finance minister. And I think it was also very important that eventually the finance minister did honor the invitation to make that presentation before Parliament.
Now, to the nitty-gritty of what he told us, yes, he told us about the 18 plus billion and how the allocations had been made, what had been spent on PPE, feeding, and all of that. Did we get the accountability we expected?
I mean, I think from his point of view, and based on whatever information they have at the ministry, he came to Parliament and he shared all of that. You know, he gave the details of the breakdown as to whether Parliament is satisfied or not. From the indication that I got from the Speaker, it appears that that was not 100% enough. If you think about the referral to the subcommittee to further look into the presentation of the finance minister, I think that these things, you know, when these demands of accountability are very appropriate in the governance setup, and I think that it was very important for the finance minister to show up. I think it was very important that he shared details. And I think if there are further details that could be shared to clarify any unanswered further questions that Parliament and its subcommittees have, I think it's
so in other words, the Finance Com Health Committee that has been set up by the Speaker has your tacit support.
Yes. Yes, and again, in any oversight setup, right, that if the institution charged with doing the oversight work still has unanswered questions, then I think it is very appropriate that further questions are asked. And therefore, yes, I do support the idea of further probing by the subcommittee just to make sure that all questions are answered to the satisfaction of the institution of Parliament.
Now, I mean, the committee is going to do its work, but, and this is a question I have posed as well to those in recent days. When it comes to the international community, the entire exercise, I remember speaking to Kweku Kwarteng, the chairman of the Finance Committee, and he said, look, I feel it was unnecessary on some scores, but yeah, we've had the finance minister come and do it anyway. But going further, I mean, what are they going to find out? The Auditor General's department is there to probe these matters. Is that step further even necessary? And when it comes to the international community, they already have the facts and the figures. Is this going to change anything with them, do you think?
Well, I mean, as to whether it would change the facts, I think, we are yet to see that. But in terms of whether other bodies would be able to look into, so for example, you make reference to the Auditor General. Yes, the Auditor General can also do an audit, a special audit of COVID-19 funds, right? But as Sami said, sometimes the Auditor General's reports don't even get debated and looked at in Parliament, even at the committee level, sometimes a year, 2 years, 2 years after. So for me, whichever angle or whichever route we take, that if ultimately the issue is about ensuring that whatever public funds were spent in the name of insulating us against COVID, that if there remains unanswered questions, then that's the right thing to do. But like you said, if upon further probing and further investigation, the committee finds that, yes, the facts are really the same, then that's great. It just confirms that the finance minister made a presentation and, all the facts are still the same. If in their investigation or further deliberations, they find out that there are still unanswered questions, they can always bring the finance minister back. Because again, for me, all of these things goes to the heart of ensuring that the principle of good governance, transparency, accountability is always adhered to, and that everybody has a role to play in ensuring this notion of good governance that we continuously speak about.
Just to wrap, I know you're usually concerned about this area, COVID-19. I just want to take a swipe at that. When you look at the uptick in our numbers, I mean, it's been surprising in just a few days where we find ourselves, and a few people losing their lives, unfortunately. And I don't know whether you've heard, but pillion riders supposedly are also refusing to crash helmets when they, bought Okada because they feel they could contract COVID-19 from the helmets. I don't know, maybe what your quick reactions could be to this, and how maybe as a CDD fellow, you've been looking forward to seeing us resolve the matter when it comes to the numbers.
There's an element of personal choice in this whole COVID thing, right? I wear my mask religiously. I ride public transport to work. So on the train, I wear my mask. Even when I'm in the office, when I'm alone in my office, I take off my mask. But when I have to come out into the general office area, if I'm in a meeting with anyone, I make sure that I'm always in a mask. I think there's so much one can do to keep reinforcing the message of some of the basic things that if we did would help ensure that this COVID and its the increases in the cases that we see every so often in these waves go away. I think we can't stop with the public education, but at the end of the day, I think individuals must also become more responsive to the public education,
right,
and accept that even with some of these little inconveniences, ultimately one's health and the protection of one's health and our obligation to protect the health of others is very important, that we follow as much as we can all the basic protocols of COVID.
Always refreshing having you connect, and do continue to stay safe, Dr. Osai Kwapong, the CDD fellow. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you. Take care.
Okay, cool.